Today's budget speech slashed South Africa's gross domestic product growth forecast for 2017 by almost half, from 1.3% forecast in the February budget to 0.7% as a result of continued decline in business and consumer confidence that has gathered pace since 2014. The World Bank last month slashed the South African economic growth outlook for this year to 0.6% from the 1.1% it forecast earlier in the year. Despite a second quarter growth of 2.5% in May, the South African Reserve Bank had also cut the country's 2017 growth forecast to 1%. Where exactly do we stand and what can we hope for in the near future? Raymond Parsons is an economics professor at the Northwest University School of Business and he joins us live in studio. Prof, thank you so much for joining us.
Now, good evening.
What's your take on Minister Gigaba's midterm budget speech and maiden speech today?
Well, I think the point of departure must be what you've emphasized quite there, and that is we're in a low growth trap. And many of the challenges that he faced today, both the fiscal and the credibility challenges, arise from the fact that all roads lead to the fact that we're not growing rapidly enough, it's not inclusive enough, and therefore, in particular, the immediate priority for him is the shortfall in the tax revenues. How does he cover that? Now, we must understand that this medium-term budget, I'm going to call it a mini budget because that's a shorthand way which everyone will understand. It really focuses on the spending side. It says we look ahead as government for the next 3 years and we ask ourselves, what can we do about spending and what can we do about borrowing? So we send out the right messages that we've got our fiscal and our public finances under control. And what we can't settle today, what looms ahead for us in the budget in February. So you must see the so-called mini budget as a major curtain raiser for the main budget. And unfortunately, as the ministers indicated, he didn't have very much good news. Quite clearly, there's a huge shortfall on the tax revenues. He's having difficulty being able to control government spending, but he's got to do that. The financial markets, the credit rating agencies, the country has been looking to this mini budget. Perhaps our expectations have been too high. There is a limit to what he can do. He's been boxed in both by political and economic factors. And I think we must not be naive. It's not necessarily going to boost the economy, but he's tried. I think you must see it more as a sort of holding operation. He's done an exercise today which says this is what the numbers look like. I'm putting them out there. I think the problem is that the solutions don't look so apparent. And although the rhetoric of the mini budget was good, I liked, in fact, the reference to the National Development Plan. That's our vision for 2030. But as he indicated, we're falling so far short of it. We've lost so much ground by not having implemented that plan more speedily that we're now sitting with a 0.5% growth rate or 0.7. What's a decimal point between friends? It's less than 1%. And that's simply not good enough for him to be able to balance his books for employment. We are getting poorer as a nation because it's well below our population growth. So these are all the challenges that I think were summed up, but the solutions were less obvious today.
What do you think the solutions should be? Minister Gigaba said improving confidence in state-owned companies will help improve the economy. Is there will from government to clean SOEs?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is the Achilles heel, I think, in our public finance has been this ongoing problem about the governance, the management and the financing of certain key state-owned enterprises such as SAA and Eskom. Now, there was a hint in the mini budget that we might find a strategic partner for SAA, but in the meantime, this is a huge drain on our public finances. Funds that could be used to create jobs, invest in social spending, invest in infrastructure, all the better things that we should be investing in, rather than bailing out some of our ailing state corporations. We need to take some strategic decisions about the future. And this financial band-aid is not going to take us very far. So the signals here today are not as strong as I think many people would like as to what we should really be doing about restructuring the role of our state-owned enterprises. Of course, the more important ones.
But Prof, what would you put on the table to the minister if you had his ear for, say, 5 minutes? How would you advise him in terms of what to do with SOEs to ensure that there's a turnaround and they don't need government bailouts on a regular basis?
I think we've got to abandon the idea that all of them are absolutely necessary, that they all play a part. I mean, I really think that in the world of today, we need to revisit whether a government needs to run an airline, which is costing so much money, when we have other priorities. I know this is difficult, and there may be other arguments, but really we've got to be realistic. And I think the problem that one might see with the mini budget today was that his diagnosis was good, but his prognosis and prescriptions were not equal to it for a number of reasons, both political and economic. But the fact is that we need to think about these things much more fundamentally and not just look at short-term, as I say, financial band-aids, when in fact the situation is eroding. And it's quite clear we need to take new strategic decisions about the role of state-owned enterprises in South Africa. We can do better, we can invest in better things that will make many more people better off if we restructure our thinking.
Now, your take on the minister's confirmation that the state will be disposing of a portion of Telkom's shares, which has been doing the rounds in the rumour mill for some time, with an option to buy them back at a later stage. Is this the best way to go?
Well, I think there may be difference of opinion, but I think if you look at some of the other options, like, well, would you prefer him to put up VAT? I'm just using that as an example, although there will be some bad news in the main budget when we get there. I think as a theory of the second best, it probably is a way of transferring funds from one sector to another. But I think some people who are watching this program might say, but you know, that investment which we've got in Telkom is a very productive investment. We're getting good dividends. Now we're taking it out of there and we're putting it into a loss-making state-owned enterprise. So I hope that we have the wisdom to understand that we will eventually get dividends out of the new investment and not be disappointed, because there's a limit to what you can do. See, once again, it is a way of dealing with a short-term situation, but there are much bigger challenges lying ahead. When you get to February, you won't have another set of Telkom shares to sell.
To sell at that point in time. Now, Prof, there was no mention in the mini budget, as you refer to it, about possible additional support for power utility Eskom, and Eskom has submitted an application for a 19.9% electricity tariff hike for 2018 to 2019. Now, is this tariff increase necessary?
Well, it'll only become necessary if we don't get the finances, the management and the governance of Eskom right. It's clear from what we've heard so far that unless we can get that situation at Eskom under control, we will be facing not just the 20%, but maybe further increases down the road. And it is this kind of situation, especially when you talk about Eskom, which is a key public utility for the private sector. I mean, whatever one's criticism of it, the fact is it is an existing major player in the energy business. And if something goes wrong there, as the minister himself emphasized, it affects the whole economy. It affects confidence in the economy. It affects the ability of business to do business if their power tariffs are escalating out of control. So quite clearly, there's a stake that everyone has in getting this right, so that we can limit the tariff increases, get the financing, the governance and the management of Eskom right, and make whatever structural changes are necessary to ensure that you send out a message of confidence that we are going to turn this the situation around.
Now, Prof, Minister Gigaba, he mentioned, or he lauded the CEO initiative for the role of creating youth empowerment service, which is giving 1 million young South Africans jobs and internships, internship opportunities. In terms of the private sector, job creation, what role does the private sector need to play, and how big a role can they play in that space?
I think there are two answers to that. The first is, we're not going to solve the problems of South Africa unless government, labour and business in particular, unless they collaborate. And so these initiatives by business with government on both the issue of youth employment and small business are very tangible examples of a short-term cooperation which can lead to better long-term results. That is, I think, an important way to address the immediate challenges and for business to demonstrate that it can work with government in order to do these things, and for government also to work with business and with labour. But the second element is a more important one. If we want to get out of that low growth trap, you need fixed investment by the private sector. That hinges on confidence, on investor confidence, on the credit rating agencies taking a positive view of what we're doing, of consumers and indeed business, boosting their confidence about the future in such a way that they want to invest, and in that way create jobs, expand capacity, and put the economy on the higher growth path that the Minister today also said, without which he really cannot resolve these issues. So there is a responsibility to create a policy environment in the country in which particularly the domestic investor, but also the foreign investors say, this is a country in which I want to invest. I'm taking a long-term view. There is enough certainty about the way ahead for South Africa that I want to be part of the action. And that's we haven't got there yet. We haven't got there yet. And it's very important that we do get there, because we need that investment. Other than these other projects, which are very important, I'm not saying that they're not important, they will make a difference. But the longer term, to get up to that growth rate that we hope will eventually emerge from our commitment to the National Development Plan, which is 5.4, we're now at 0.7. We've got a long way to go, and we've got a lot of people who have to work together in order to make that happen.
Prof, we'll have to leave it then for now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that was Professor Raymond Parsons. And Professor Raymond Parsons is with the Northwest University School of Business, and he was joining us live in studio. Time now for a quick break. More news when we return. Stay with us.